Hey everyone, I'm Alex Pollock here doing a topic analysis for champion briefs for the 2013 CFL Nationals PF topic. On behalf of all our staff, I just want to thank you, our brief users, for your incredible support this year. We love what we do, and we're going to continue to bring you the best possible briefs as this debate season comes to a close. Now, for this video, I just wanted to outline some specific traits of the CFL National Tournament that are very unique compared to other tournaments, and then I'm going to go into the topic and talk about some things that I think can be useful. So before I go into more detail, I just want to congratulate everyone on qualifying in this tournament. It's not easy, and you deserve some recognition. Now, here are a few tips about the CFL tournament itself, because I've debated at this tournament twice, and it's a bit different than many major tournaments that you've gone to this year. First off, make sure you write down and remember your tournament ID number that your coach is going to give you. Unlike other tournaments where it says Boca Raton PP versus University RF, it just has numbers against each other. So make sure that you write down your number and remember it throughout the entire tournament, because you're going to need it if judges ask to make sure the right people are in the round and to see if you broke later that night. Now, the prelims portion of this tournament is going to be at Pope John Paul II High School in the Philadelphia area, and there's going to be buses from the tournament hotels to the high school. As for the way this tournament's set up, there are 5 prelim rounds, and you have 3 judges in every prelim round. It's something that's very different than other tournaments. Breaking to out rounds is based upon how many rounds you've won and how many ballots you've won out of the 15 judges in 5 prelim rounds. So theoretically, you could go 5-0 but only pick up 10 ballots if you win 2-1 in every round. Another unique aspect of this tournament that you need to take into account strategically is that pro speaks first and con speaks second in every round. So take this into account when you're planning your strategy for pro and con, because if you're under the school of thought that the last final focus has the best lay appeal, then con's always going to have the last say in final focus at this tournament. Now, for breaking, this tournament breaks to double octafinals, so the top 32 teams, and there's hundreds of teams, so it's a very difficult break. You need to be 4-1 and pick up more than 9 ballots. The tournament's paired randomly and geographically for rounds 1 and 2. That means you're going to hit a random team, but it's not going to be a team that's in a diocese near you, which makes sense, because why would you travel to CFL Nats to not hit a team that's in your district? Then it's going to be lag powered for rounds 3, 4, and 5, and that basically means that round 3 is going to be based on your performance in round 1, round 4 will be based on your performance after round 2, and round 5 will be based on your performance after round 3. There's no disclosure at this tournament, so you really have no idea if you're going to break until the postings come out Saturday night. Maybe you'll get a judge here or there that's going to tell you some things that they thought you did well or could have done better, but don't expect much disclosure. You're going to be in the dark until postings come out Saturday night. One other aspect of this tournament that I think is unique, because I've done this twice, is that the prelims is a very, very tough and grueling day. And we've talked about this in our video and topic analysis and champion briefs. And even by debate tournament standards, if you look at the schedule, the buses leave the hotels starting at 5:45 a.m. to take you to the high school, and don't start returning until 7 p.m. So by the time you get back to the hotel, you're going to have been awake for well over 13 hours, have debated 5 rounds, and on top of that, they don't release postings until 10:30 that night, so you're probably not going to want to go to bed until you find out whether or not you have to get up the next morning to debate. So I highly recommend trying to prepare as much as possible before you actually get to the CFL National Tournament and you get to your hotel. That way you can get a decent night's sleep before prelims. Otherwise, you're going to be a zombie Sunday if you make it to out rounds. As for judging, CFL Nats gets a lot of flack for having a poor judging pool. But I don't think it's entirely fair to call any judging pool poor. I think that these judges judge rounds with a different set of criteria than other judges at tournaments such as the TOC. So the CFL rules, in a way, facilitate this phenomenon. If you read the bylaws, it even says, whenever possible, lay judges for public forum will be preferred over experienced debate coaches, judges, or college competitors. I know that this is controversial, but it is what it is, and I think you need to be aware of its implications. So as a result, there are a lot of judges that aren't as technical or as experienced as many debaters would like. But that doesn't mean the judges are bad. It just means that you need to adapt your style to become more persuasive and less technical or progressive. I would highly avoid using debate jargon, such as link turn, impact turn, extend, overview. And instead of the word card or evidence, I would say the word analysis, because it's a more generic term that doesn't have as much of a debate jargon tone to it. Unless you know your judge is fine with jargon, then feel free to use jargon, but I would stray away from using it. definitely ask your judges for paradigms before each round. That way you have an idea of what your panel is, since you have 3 judges in each round. So if you have 2 flow judges and 1 more lay judge, make sure you adapt. Or if you have 3 lay judges or 3 flow judges, it can hurt you, and it's a good way to sort of loosen up before the round, talk to the judges, become more cordial. Not all the judges are lay, and you do get some great coaches and former debaters. I know that Sam, Michael, and myself from the Champion Brief staff are hopefully going to be able to be there and judge at this tournament, so there will be some technical judges there. One rule that they changed from last year to this year, is the laptop rule. And if you look in the bylaws, Article 2, Section D9, it says that now you can use laptops and electronic retrieval devices as long as they are connected to the internet, obviously. This is a pretty significant change because last year every card you read or cited needed to be printed out, which was a lot more work to carry around, and it was not that well organized, and it was also not very environmentally friendly, which is kind of ironic because last year's topic was about the environment. But let's move on to this year's topic. So the main goal of U.S. public education should be to eliminate racial and economic achievement gaps. I'm probably one of the few people that likes this topic. I think it's an interesting topic about education that has a lot of potential if people debate it in the right way. So let's note a couple of key words. Main goal. This implies that eliminating racial and economic achievement gaps is the main objective of the educational system. It doesn't mean it's the only objective, and I think that distinction is really important for pro teams to make because it doesn't preclude other goals. If a con team tries to argue that this destroys the ability of the education system to make people smarter, I think pro can easily say that there can be more than one goal, and this is true of any government policy. Think about the war in Afghanistan. Many people would argue that the main goal of the war was to find and punish and eliminate the people responsible for planning 9/11. But there's other goals that have been involved in the war, such as rebuilding the country, improving infrastructure, reducing poverty, etc. So I think you can have a policy that has a main goal, but still have several other goals that can be achieved, and you can still work towards achieving more than one goal. So I think that this is important in terms of how you weigh the round, that this doesn't preclude other goals. As con, I think you should point out that if you make something the main goal, you're obviously going to focus on it more than other things, and why that's bad to focus on it more than other things. Another word in the resolution that I think is a little problematic is eliminate. And I think this was a poor choice by the committee who words the resolutions, because eliminate suggests almost a utopian goal where there are no gaps at all, which I personally believe is very difficult to achieve in the real world where there's 0 gaps completely eliminated. I think it would have been made more sense for them to use a word such as lessen, reduce, or minimize. I also believe that this word implies that the measures to achieve this goal need to be strong. And I think this is where con can get ahead of pro, because con could feasibly argue that we needn't focus on eliminating these gaps, but try a more balanced approach where we focus on something else, but we work to minimize or lessen these gaps. I think that's a strategy con could go with. Another word that I think is tough to deal with is and. This might not seem like a big deal, but I think it is, because I think pro is in a more difficult position where they can only win the round if they prove the need to reduce both racial and economic achievement gaps. So pro needs to have one contention, at least, on each aspect of this. One reason why we should work on economic, and one reason why we should work on racial achievement gaps. And second, con needs to constantly point out to the judge throughout the round that since the resolution says and, pro needs to argue for both aspects of the resolution. I think that's a place con can have a huge advantage. Another area that I think needs to be defined, and I think this is up to you and your strategy, is what achievement gaps mean. I think this has 3 meanings. The first meaning could be achievement in the classroom in terms of grades and test scores. The second meaning could be achievement in terms of income and prestige for individuals throughout their life. And the third meaning could be talking about achievement gaps on a school-wide level, meaning poorer school districts or more diverse or minority school districts compared to better school districts that are more well off. For instance, the goal of a policy such as No Child Left Behind is aimed at reducing achievement gaps on test scores for low-achieving students, while a policy such as affirmative action is aimed at limiting achievement gaps in society in terms of your educational attainment and your income throughout your life if you're a minority or someone of lower who comes from a disadvantaged background. Another thing is you can educate someone just to make them smarter, not just to make them smarter, but also to give them greater opportunities throughout life. And if you did the college education debate last January, you kind of know that a lot of the data shows that college isn't necessarily making people smarter, but it's giving them the prestige that they were smart enough to attend college, which makes it better for them to attain a job throughout their life. Now, let's look at some arguments. I think that you can have three types of cases for this topic. The first can be a general case about ideals, goals, and rights. On pro, this translates into telling the judge why we need to make reducing racial and economic achievement gaps the main goal of the educational system. Describe how these disparities exist, what is the negative implication of these disparities, and how the educational system should be targeted at fixing them. On con, this means outlining other goals, such as gender gaps, why education should just focus at making people smarter, improving the ability for American youth to compete in a global economy, and then explain why these other goals are better for the goals for the educational system than eliminating racial and economic achievement gaps. People may try and characterize these types of con arguments as counterplans. However, they're just trade-off arguments, because if you were saying we should make eliminating racial and economic achievement gaps the main goal, it precludes us from making something else the main goal, which has negative implications. In the brief, an example of this argument would be sort of the implementation of Brown versus the Board of Education. And this is a great example of why the government needs to take a strong role in ensuring racial equality in education, because many would argue that if the government watchdogs were not working so that there is equality in the educational system, you would see much higher levels of racial discrimination than we see today. And you can talk about how Brown versus the Board of Education, like the implementation of that, is a great example of why we need to make this the main goal. The second case should be more focused on the benefits and harms of certain policies that attempt to achieve these goals. For instance, you can't just argue that something should be the main goal unless you articulate how you would go about doing this, at least in my mind. The example of this is, say you want to improve income equality in America. It sounds like a good goal, but you need to outline how we achieve this through higher taxes, more social programs, etc. And in brief, we discussed these types of policies with regard to educational gaps. So you can talk about the harms and benefits of affirmative action, of diversity in education, of No Child Left Behind, voucher programs, etc. These policies are specifically aimed at implementing this goal outlined in the resolution. So a pro team can argue, look, this policy, affirmative action, has been very successful at reducing racial achievement gaps throughout life. So if we made this the main goal of U.S. educational policy, we can tell that this would be a successful policy and that it would have positive societal benefits. In this case, I think Kahn should argue that the harms that these policies have on the educational system don't warrant them being the main goal, and that they can be counterproductive at achieving their goal. And we talk about this in the brief, where certain policies aimed at improving diversity create this stigma that the only reason people got there was because of these policies and not because of their own achievement. And in most cases, that's not true, but it creates an unfair stigma that undermines legitimate accomplishments. And I think that if you do that type of argumentation on the con, it can be very effective. That you talk about how many of these when you make this the main goal, it's counterproductive. The third case, I think, can be the most interesting because it's sort of a hybrid of the two. It's where you argue two separate things in pro or con. Why this should or shouldn't be the goal of education. And two, give examples of how this policy attempted to achieve this goal and was successful or failed, and the harms of the policy or benefits of the policy on society. So in pro, you could say, yes, there are disparities between different racial groups and economic groups that need to be fixed because it's unjust and because it creates sort of an underclass in society and it has negative societal implications. Then argue how a policy like No Child Left Behind or affirmative action, which was specifically targeted at fixing these gaps, was successful, and how this success warrants making this a policy on a nationwide scale, making this the main goal of the education. On con, you can outline why certain policies haven't been successful, but also why the success of the policies doesn't matter. So even if pro proves that affirmative action is a good policy, that doesn't necessarily mean it should be the main goal of the U.S. educational system. So you can say something along the lines of, even if affirmative action does work and is a positive benefit for society, that isn't a reason to affirm the resolution. So that to me is the most interesting kind of thing you could do, where you sort of do a balance of the both. There are other case options, but I think that those are the three that, if I'm your judge, I'd want to hear something along those lines. Thanks for watching. I hope these ideas help. I hope the tips I gave you for the tournament itself help. It's a fun tournament. It's very impressive that you've qualified, I hope you have a good time. I hope that I'll be at CF on Nats to see some of you debating this topic. Stay champions, my friends.